also happy to moderate this symposium under the theme Mutant Variant of Coronavirus and the Prospects of the Pandemic. With the start of 2020, the entire world began to face the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a local endemic in Wuhan, in China, but by mid-March in the same year, that epidemic changed into a real pandemic and spread out to different countries. And this pandemic affected several levels and fields. Several efforts have been exerted in order to contain the virus. The investment shrank in the countries of the world. The travels stopped in all means, and the financial burdens became more in different countries, and the unemployment rate increased. And of course, that cost the economy heavily. And despite this heavy cost, we can say that this cost or less than the health impact, because the healthcare sector was the front line in containing this pandemic, or to treat the cases, the positive cases that were existing in all countries. With the development of the vaccines, also we witnessed the new variant, which resisted the vaccines and also affected the health of several people. And of course, we witnessed several aspects of crisis during these 2 years. Despite all these circumstances, we bet on our adaptability, and we also bet on developing new efficient remedies and medicines in order to change this virus into a normal virus that can be contained seasonally and annually, like other viruses such as the flu. However, the key question is to what extent the countries of the world, individually and collectively, can manage to overcome this pandemic through the containment of this pandemic, and also develop new means and items to face these challenges of the pandemic. And now I give the floor to Dr. Akmal Abdul Hakim. We'll have an interactive session, and we will ask questions and he will deliver the answers. You have the floor. In the beginning, I would like to extend my thanks to Trends Research and Advisory, and in particular to Dr. Mohammed Al-Ali, the CEO of the Center, and to all the participants in this symposium. In the beginning, Dr. Akmal, if you can tell us a bit about the history of the viruses and the humans. The modern medicine discovered these viruses only 120 years ago. However, numerous scientists say that the viruses emerged in the very beginning of the history and the life of the Earth. When the life started, it was in the form of viruses. And when the project of the human genome, which set the road map of the human genome, they found out that 8% of this genome map is derived from the virus, which means that in each one of us, our genes have been extracted or integrated from the viruses. And it is believed that these genes they are not efficient, but they played an important role in the last 2 million years. Currently, the viruses cause a big number of illnesses and diseases. I give some examples. The measles and the hepatitis and the polio and the variosis and the different other diseases like influenza, the SARS, AIDS, and recently COVID. And there is a specialization in medicine, which means that the physician is specialized in dozens of illnesses and diseases. During the last 100 years, the modern medicine managed to overcome one virus, which is known as the smallpox, and after that, the polio. And the other thing that I would like to mention is that the viruses do not affect the human only, but also the animals and the plants and even the bacteria, the microbes. These beings are affected by the viruses. And this attribute is utilized by the doctors and the specialists to find out new treatment because they are trying to make the virus itself an antibody because the antibodies are used and we also bet on the super bacteria, the super bug. When the patient comes to us, we give them the maximum of the antibodies and they don't respond positively because the bacteria are resistant to these antibodies. So when the viruses affect the bacteria, we use this bacteria as an antibody to get rid of the virus. The Russians currently are very advanced in this field. In the past, people used to talk about the virus as a virus. Now they talk about the variant. Can you give us a glance about the difference between the variants and the viruses and how these mutations are taking place? The genes are formed in a particular way during the reproduction of any and every entity and living being. There is a copying of the genes that are derived from the mother and the father, and this cloning is sometimes subject to some errors because sometimes you copy the papers and during the copying a problem can happen and what happens is that the copy becomes different compared to the genes of the father or the mother. So we call this a mutation, and if this mutation moves to the other generations, we call it the generation of the variant. So we can say that the mutation is the change and the variant is the result of this change. Of course, the copying process and the mutant is a normal process, and whenever there is a reproduction and continuity, there are margins of errors in copying because from father to son to grandchildren, etc., when we have a process of a series of reproductions, the variants happen more. And the same thing applied to COVID-19. In the beginning, Corona was reproducing comfortably, generation after the other, and this led to the emergence of the mutant and the variant. And after the discovery of the vaccines, another problem occurred, which is there is no justice in distributing the vaccines. And we will talk about the injustice in delivering vaccines because in some countries the people have been vaccinated 100%, and in other countries this percentage didn't exceed 10% of the population. This leads us to talk about the relation between the variant and the capability of the virus to spread. As I said, when there are mutations, the variant become more resistant to the vaccine, and some results can take place, and there are complications for the affected case. And if we talk about Delta variant and the Omicron variant, what happened between the two? The mutation that took place in Omicron made it stronger in terms of infection, but less capable in causing complications. Why? Because this mutation, this genetic mutation, made it inclining to the nose problems and the nasal channel, etc. And its presence in this spots made it more capable of affecting others that are in the outer surface. The delta is different. It has the tendency to delve deep into the lungs and enter into these aerial particles of the lungs, and it is buried inside. But this characteristic made it capable of destroying the vital organs of the lungs, especially this tube in the upper part of the lung. And if a harm is happening on the upper part, it's not a big deal. But when we go to the bottom part, this causes complications to the patient, and this can lead the patient to enter the ICU. In the case of Omicron, this variant was focusing on the upper side of the lungs, so it is less harmful to the lungs. However, this specificity made it for the variant Omicron to spread at a larger scale compared to previous variants. So can we say that the impact of variant is felt in the efficiency of the vaccines and the remedies and the treatments? If we talk about Omicron, we can say that we are in the first stages of analysis and evaluating the data, because it is only a short period of time, so we cannot talk about a confirmed set of data that are proved 100%. However, we can say that the physicians and the specialists found that the current vaccines have an efficiency against Omicron if the patient takes 2 doses, and the efficiency of the vaccine can reach 88% if the patient takes the 3rd dose, the booster. So the current vaccines are still efficient, still capable of protecting the person, and they had some statistics that talked about the efficiency of the vaccines. 2 doses of the vaccine can guarantee a protection of 30% to 40% from the infection, and a protection of 70% against the deterioration of the case of the patient. And if the person takes the 3rd dose, the booster, the protection against the infection reaches 75%, and the possibility of hospitalization and in the ICU um, reaches 88%, which means the patient gets a protection of 88% against hospitalization and ICU. So the vaccines that we took as children are not efficient 100%, and the available vaccines against corona are having an efficiency that is similar to the vaccines that we used to take decades ago. Regarding the variants, doctor, are there procedures and the measures that can be taken in order to prevent the mutation? As I told you in the beginning, the mutation is a result of the reproduction of the virus. And if you can stop this malign circle or break it, so you can minimize the number of mutations. How you can do it? How you can break this vicious cycle of the mutation? First, by following the prevention guidelines like the social distancing, the physical distancing, wearing the masks, and of course improving the quality of the ventilation, washing the hands, and the vaccines. Because the virus, if it moves in every single stage, it is an opportunity, a window for it to mutate and to become another variant. So if you can stop this process, there is a possibility that is minimal for it to mutate. Doctor, the variant, how did they get their names? Honestly, there was a problem in the beginning of the variant, especially in India, because everyone was seeing the Indian variant, and the Indians got upset and they didn't like the naming of the virus and the relation between the virus and the Indian. Imagine if the virus emerges in UAE, they call it the Emirati virus. So it's not the case. It's why the WHO resorted to use the Greek alphabet, which means alpha, beta, gamma, epsilon, etc., in order to make it easy for the people to refer to a virus without falling into political incorrectness and without relating a particular virus to a culture or to a country. In addition to that, some terms are having bad connotations, and some alphabetical letters, even in Greek, are having some negative connotation. It's why the WHO resorted to unify this procedure and use the Greek alphabet letters. And Omicron is for the general use, for media, because the general public will not mention the variant B1230, for instance. So this naming is used only by the specialist. So these names of alpha, beta, and omicron are just for the general use and for the general public. Doctor, in this rich event, and in this event which is rich of information, we will try to get the most from you, and we will allow the participant to ask questions. The development of vaccines the companies that invest in developing the treatment and the remedies, do you think that some vaccines can be developed efficiently. And what about the conspiracy theory? Because some are accusing the big pharma of orchestrating this in order to make profit. Well, let me tell you that the first treatment and medicine is to those who had surgeries and treatment like cancers. So in the healthcare, there was a priority given to uh, those who have chronic diseases, but we have to acknowledge that the patients of diabetes and cardiovascular diseases and the cancer, they were dealt with unfairly because they didn't. Some hospitals in the West didn't have the beds to hospitalize the patients of cancer, etc. This virus, corona, because it emerged in the era of social media, it was accompanied with a wave and a tsunami of information and fake news and misleading information. So some conspiracy theories are really ridiculous. Now, 70% of the population has not been vaccinated yet. So there is no production that is sufficient for the entire population. Let me tell you that in the middle world, even the frontliners, nurses and the physicians, only 25% got the vaccines. So I don't have a stagnation in the vaccines of Delta, so that I go to the other stage and start do the marketing campaign for Omicron, for instance. Because we know that the symptoms of Omicron are less harmful. So we know that some have talked about the herd immunity. So this scenario of the conspiracy theory is contradicting the reality because even with Delta, there was a shortage of the doses and the shipments, and the countries started to pay a lot of money in order to get priority in receiving the vaccines and doses. So it is not a logical idea to talk about the conspiracy theory. Sometimes there is another problem. In November, there were efforts to mobilize people and encourage them to get vaccinated. Even in the mosques, the imams were calling and encouraging the people to take vaccines. So there is a panic that is spreading against vaccinations. Why? I have a position in this regard. I don't think that the legislators will agree with me. I think that those who are spreading fake news about the vaccines should be criminalized, because anyone who is idle goes to Facebook and starts talking and spreading fake news. Even the president of Brazil said that if you take the vaccine, you will turn into crocodiles. So, in my opinion, anyone who says something like that on Facebook or on TV, etc., they should be punished by law, because they spread panic and fear among people. And these measures and procedures, if they are not taken, lives are lost. And now we reach the point when we describe COVID-19 as the uh, pandemic of the non-vaccinated. So, in my opinion, those who are spreading these fake news and rumors and the conspiracy theory, they should be punished. Today, there was a news in Al Ittihad newspaper that said that the government of Saudi Arabia will imprison those who spread rumors. I think that this policy should be implemented also on those who are spreading rumors about the healthcare and the medicine, because anyone who is doing that, they should present the scientific evidence. If if they don't have that, they should be held accountable, because people are deceived and this cost them their lives. It's not a matter of personal opinion, and the science is not based on personal opinions. We have double-blind studies, we have placebo, we have controlled studies. Did you conduct any studies? Because as a physician, if I say something, I should share with others my sources, and when I publish something, I am asked from where I got this information. It's not a matter of just expressing the opinion. I think that Bill Gates is making this and that. Do you have an evidence? If yes, share it with the others, with the audience. Otherwise, you should be held accountable, because it is like scientific defamation. And when people take the microphones on TV and they say that I'm a physician specialized in this, but hold on, you can be a physician, but a psychologically pervert person, and maybe you have some purposes of getting fame or getting more fans, etc., or having some agenda. It's why the modern medicine is based on evidence. So during the times of my father and taken into consideration the human relations with the physicians, etc., this is no longer applicable. Whatever you see should be based on science. It's why the budget of the medical research is in billions. Otherwise, we could not have reached the current point.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Doctor, for this very important lecture. I have a question regarding the booster. Those who want to take the booster, should it be from the same type of the vaccine? For example, the Chinese vaccine. If we take like a Chinese vaccine, should we take the booster, like the third dose, from the same type of the vaccine? The answer to this question is that we need to follow the instructions of the health authorities. If the health authorities of the country where you are or the city where you live, they agree with that, you can go ahead. There's nothing that would scientifically prevent that or support it, but each local authority would issue its own decision. So, because if there is a video on YouTube or on Facebook and you can watch it from Morocco or from Egypt, it's better to rely on the instructions of the health authorities where you live. Like if we take the UAE, I took 2 doses of Sinopharm, and then I took 2 doses from Pfizer, because this is what they say in the UAE, and each country has its own policies, and we need to comply with the policies and its actions. So I took 2 doses of Sinopharm and then 2 doses of Pfizer. So it depends on the country where you live and the instructions they give you. Is there a time interval for taking the booster. This type of infection is called breakthrough infection. A person could be vaccinated and still catch the infection. This does not mean that the vaccine is not liable. The main objective of the vaccine is not to prevent the infection. It's in case that the infection happens, your body will be prepared with the antibodies and with the immune cells would be ready, and not wait until the infection happens and then the body would recognize the virus and try to build antibodies. So at that time, the virus would already destroy your body. So once it's not like it's just like a country that has been invaded and then go and sign arms deals. This is why vaccination aims to help you in case you get infected with the virus in your body with the weapons it has, which are the antibodies. They all will be prepared for the battle. So within 3 or 4 days, you will be done with this virus. This is the idea behind the vaccine. I could, for example, catch the virus for which I had a vaccine. I took a vaccine when I was 6 months old, and there is something that's called immunity memory. Once this virus enters my body, one of the cells would identify it and its genetic composition and would send alarm to the immunity system and it will say the virus we have seen 50 years ago is back, and they will say we are prepared, we'll deal with it. So it would come and I wouldn't even feel it. So after 50 years, the body will still be prepared. It depends on the infection. If we take influenza virus, it's one of the viruses that mutate fast. This is why every year there is a new version of it, and every year you need to get jabbed again, because influenza virus, the jab that we used to take in November is different from the one we took last year. We have viruses that are somehow stable, do not change. And then we have viruses, especially for respiratory diseases like SARS and COVID. They change very fast. If you say that you get jabbed against COVID and you would expect to resist for the next 20 years, I would say that's not possible. But viruses like measles or polio, we took the vaccines for them when we were children. And if you have children at the 6th grade, they will tell you bring your children to get vaccinated, and at 10th grade you will have also to give them boosters, and there are schedules for that, specific ages, and after that maybe every 10 years, etc. Talking about the prospects of the virus, there are some conflicts about the information. When we hear that World Health Organization warns us about the quick spread of the virus, there may be some viruses that would emerge in the future. And the Minister of Health from France said that the rapid spreading of Omicron would lead to collective immunity of the people. And this will help us to fight the mutation. So this conflict of information between health authorities themselves doesn't lead to some confusion among the public in general. To answer this question, I remember saying in English, I cannot predict the future because it's unpredictable. So this is an English saying. It's not a conflict of information. Is that the idea is that you have two different analysts. If we're talking, for example, about the future of oil in the next 10 years, we will have a researcher who will talk about the increase of use of renewable, and another researcher would have a different opinion, and he will say that the world economy will progress immensely. So it's not a conflict of opinion, but it's a prediction of the future. And in any area, when you are predicting, there will be some risks, whether it's in social or political or economic area. So everyone may be talking about a possible scenario. Each of the scenarios would have different solutions. What happens is that either Omicron will spread a lot and lead to immunity, and that spreading would lead to the end of this virus thanks to the immunity, because people all over the world would build that immunity and then would reach the mass immunity, and they will have this like disease that would affect small part of the people in society, but it's not a pandemic. This is a possible scenario. The second scenario that the French president talked about, no, not the French president, the French Minister of Health. During this process, the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, he said that yesterday. He said that while it's infecting people to reach the level of mass immunity, the process of spreading may lead to a new variant, which will be gamma. And then the story will start from scratch. Just like this, it will combine the strength of Delta and the spreading of Omicron. So will Omicron remain stable and infect all of us and give us mass immunity, and then become a disease that will be embodied in all of us and will adapt to it? Or during this process that will follow in the next months and the next years, that we will have a new, like a baby of this virus that will be more efficient. We don't know which scenario will happen. This is why there are different possibilities. Thank you very much for this important lecture. You talked about the scientific aspects of the virus. As researchers, we witnessed the discussions that took place over the world about the virus. If we can collect scientific standards through which people over the world will be able to see how these variants can emerge. Second question regarding the predictions of viruses. As a layman, do you expect or do you predict that we'll go back to the normality or will we witness some new types of these variants? I will answer your first question because it's easy. It depends on which scenario will happen. Whether in the next 6 months or the next year we'll have mass immunity and we'll have the biggest part of people in the world vaccinated and we'll go back to normality. If the virus gets mutated and we get a variant that's more aggressive, then we'll go back to the starting point of December 2019. When will we go back to normal life? It depends on which scenario will happen. The evidence that we have now, I can't tell you actually because I can't control the virus. It's spreading and may God help us, but we ask this virus not to mutate and give us a new types of variants. Otherwise, we'll go back to the starting point. Regarding the second question of the emergence of this virus, the World Health Organization sent a commission to investigate the starting points of the virus, and they could not come up with a definitive answer. But the most possible scenario is that it was transferred from animals. This is not the first time or the last time. Actually, all the virus diseases, they are animal diseases that got transferred to human beings. So we have zoonotic diseases. For example, we have different diseases that were transferred to human beings from cows and goats. What we have now as the new diseases, most likely it will be the result of the human being interfering more with the natural environment because the population is increasing. There is some sort of encroachment of the natural sources that were closed. They have their own lives, they have their own viruses. So because of that encroachment, we are catching the viruses. For example, SARS virus, we caught it from animals. So the possibility of seeing new diseases being transferred from animals to a human being exists. And most of the viruses, when they emerged, they did not, they were not destined to attack or infect a human being, but we caught it from animals. For example, it was supposed to be transferred from the cow, but from the cow it would be transferred to the horse, but from the horse it would be caught by the human being. So if we look at the cuisine of the Chinese, I would say that some part of it depends on wildlife. For example, eating snakes, that's something normal in the Chinese cuisine, or eating dogs. They have the special days in the year where they slaughter dogs and kill them. So most likely it was transferred from a wild animal that was living in the forest and it was hunted, and then there was a mutation in the virus that allowed it to infect a human being. So the answer to this question is that there will be no impact in life. They say that when the virus reaches the culmination level, it starts waning. what I said is that during the spreading and the itching, the mass immunity, there will be. We have this Omicron. It came from where exactly? It came from Delta. It did not start from scratch. It already exists, and there are many variants, but many of them we cannot. They are not source of concerns. We have many variants. There are not only 2 or 3 variants. Maybe there are hundreds of variants, and the World Health Organization classify them as variants of interest and variants of concern. So while it's spreading, and for us to reach the mass immunity would be see a new variant. This is why relying on the idea of its spreading, we could say, let's wait until we build immunity against Omicron. We would be taking a big risk because we will give it the opportunity to give us a new variant. Thank you, doctor. I have a question. In case the variant evolves, can it overcome the vaccines? Like something that all the vaccine would not be able to fight it. It depends on the mutation that will happen in the vaccine. The vaccine gives it is sent to the body, and the body would identify it. It's like a lock in the body that will identify this body that penetrated, and then when the key gets into the lock, it will kill the virus. This a new variant, this part for which we built our key, our antibody. Did this antibody become useless, or is it still capable of locking inside the virus and kill it? So maybe the level of change may be mild or maybe huge, but the immunity of the cell and the antibodies in general, they can see it, and they would say that yes, we have seen you before. Maybe you have changed your clothes, but I can still recognize you. And in this case, they will be less efficient because they are generalized. Because antibodies, they know exactly who you are. They know your components, and they know how to destroy you. They have the weapons ready to destroy this virus. So the immunity cells, they are general. So it depends on your immunity. Influenza virus changes a lot. The virus of measles, I had it before. Doesn't it, for example, evolve, since the viruses evolve all the time? As I said, there are different types of viruses. They estimate the number of viruses existing on the planet Earth as 1, and you can put behind 1 32 zeros. So, you know, like when you put 6 zeros, it's 6 million, but you can put actually 32 zeros. This is, in general, the number of viruses that exist on the Earth. So the goat, for example, they are different from the horse. Yes, they are ruminating animals with 4 legs, but they are different. And each one has different characteristics. So the viruses were not created from the same fabrics. Some viruses have constants and they do not change, but some viruses change quickly. No, it's not related to the change. It's about the nature of the virus. It depends on the virus if it likes to change. The second thing is that the vaccine that you took, the part of the vaccine that you took, and you let your immunity body recognize it, does that part not capable of changing, even if the virus changed from outside the heart of the virus, whatever it changed, it shaped from outside, there is a constant part that will not change. So this is a complicated issue. At the end, Doctor, we'd like to conclude with one question. We know that most questions are about the mutations, and this is a concern for people all over the world. The lack of justice in distribution of the vaccines between countries. As I said, there is a close relationship between allowing the virus to spread and seeing new variants of the virus and its mutation. What happened in the last year is that till last November, we had 8 billion doses of the vaccine that were distributed to people in the world. These 8 billion vaccines were concentrated in the Western world, Europe, North America, and some part of China, but Africa and Latin America did not get enough vaccines. The same applies to tests. For each 1,000 tests that took place since the emergence of this virus, 990 tests were in Western countries and the rest in poor countries. So we need to conduct such tests to know who caught this virus so we can stop the spreading. This inequity in the distribution of vaccine led to the spreading of the virus, and it came back to those countries who had built immunity. Because where did Delta emerge? It emerged in India. Omicron, where did it emerge? It emerged in South Africa. So if I vaccine all the inhabitants of my country at 100%, and the neighboring country have no vaccines, the virus will be spreading in that country and will come back to me in a new variant, and all my efforts will go in vain. This is why there should be an international effort. There is some international efforts, such as COVAX, but in case that there is vaccines for the poor countries, and we tell them if you do not vaccinate those people, the virus will mutate and will come back to your country, and this new variants may emerge in those poor countries, and even with our 100% of vaccination, we will see a new variant coming back to us. We were like on the same. We are like on the same boat. We either sail together in safety or we will sink. In the Western countries, I don't know what's the word to use, but they have expired vaccines, and they did not want to share them with the poor countries. Some European countries, they have stocks of vaccines which are 4 or 5 times the number of the population. and they were storing them until it expires, and then they will burn it. So you need to think smart, because that virus will come back to you from the neighboring countries. Now, we can't say that we are living in a world. We are living in a small village. It's not like the global village of Dubai, but we are living like in a small village. And for disease to start in China and then to reach us in the Middle East. So in the past, it used to take centuries for a disease to spread between countries. But now you can catch a disease from Brazil, and the same day you get it here. At the end, I would like to express my thanks to Dr. Akmal Abdel Hakim for covering all aspects of the pandemic and for giving us full answers. I would like also to thank our followers, and we hope to see you in the next lectures, and we express our gratitude and thanks to you from the Research and Advisory. Thank you very much.